let's talk about taking a risk. Hey guys, welcome back to another YouTube devotional video. To start our video today, I have a question for you. What is the biggest risk that you've ever taken? Think about that for a moment. I want to tell you a little bit about a risk that I took back in high school. When I was in high school, one of the biggest risks that I took was because of a girl. Are you surprised? Guys in high school will do almost anything to impress a girl, so of course that's what I did. I was talking to this girl and I really wanted to impress her, and this is the same girl that I left at the laser tag. If you guys remember that video a little while ago that we posted on YouTube, I told a story about pretty much ditching a girl at a laser tag place, but that's beside the story. But this was the same girl. So our church youth group decided to take a trip to Hershey Park. And if you're not familiar with Hershey Park is this place that has a bunch of really big and really fast roller coasters. And a little bit of context here. Back then, when I was in high school, I was probably about 16. I hated roller coasters. I was actually absolutely terrified of roller coasters. And of course, I didn't want anybody to know that because I was a 16-year-old man and I was tough, and it would be embarrassing if people knew that I was afraid of roller coasters. But this girl that I was talking to, of course, my luck, she loved roller coasters. She really loved roller coasters. So our youth group goes to this Hershey Park trip, and of course, all she wanted to do was ride these roller coasters. But somehow, I don't know how, still to this day, I don't know how I worked this out, but I convinced this girl to go with me with a group of friends who pretty much spent the whole day in the arcade and the water park area. Sweat off my brow. I didn't have to go on any of the roller coasters that day and embarrass myself. I didn't look like a baby. The day was saved. My masculinity was still intact. Well, that was until a couple weeks later, this same girl asked me if I would like to go to Hershey Park again with her family. Now, this is when I knew I was doomed, because her family was really big on roller coasters. They loved riding roller coasters. She was really big on roller coasters. So I knew that I was doomed. And of course, I had no good excuse on why I couldn't be able to go, so I ended up going to Hershey Park with this girl and her family. And I was terrified. I did not sleep well the night before. The thought of dropping on a roller coaster made me sick to my stomach. My hands were like clammy the whole day. I couldn't even pick up anything. My hands were so sweaty. I was so nervous. I was literally a mess. And guess what happened that day? That day, I took a risk, one of the biggest risks of my high school career, and I got on a roller coaster. And guess what? I absolutely loved it. I fell in love with roller coasters that day. I loved the adrenaline. I loved the feeling of falling on a roller coaster. It's all because I took a risk to impress this high school girl. But because of that risk, I discovered that I really enjoy amusement parks. And now I'm really big on roller coasters, and I enjoy going to Hershey Park and other amusement parks. It's one of my favorite summer day trips, all because I took a risk to impress a high school girl. So, taking risks. Risks can be scary at first, but when we get out of our comfort zone and when we experience something new, it's amazing what can happen. There's a story in the Bible about a man who took a risk and grew from it. And I want to read this because I think it relates really well to what we are talking about. It's a story about this guy named Peter. And a little bit of background on Peter. Peter was a disciple of Jesus. He was one of the closest followers of Jesus. And truth be told, Peter, he had some doubts and some fears when it came to following Jesus. Following Jesus was a risk already for Peter. Matthew 14, starting in verse 22. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat that the disciples were on, the boat by this time was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. So Jesus is walking on the water. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost," and they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." And Peter, this disciple that we were talking about, Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord Jesus, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took a hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." You see, Peter took a risk here in his faith by following Jesus out onto the water. It was something uncertain. It was something scary. It was something he was probably terrified of. Peter was most likely out on boats a lot back in biblical times, and he was probably terrified of storms and the sea. But Jesus called Peter here to take a risk, to step out of his comfort zone. And as a result of that, Peter's faith grew. It says here that everybody on the boat worshiped Jesus. So here's my challenge to you. Get out of the boat. Get out of the boat. Get out of your comfort zone and venture into what God is calling you to. If God is calling you to go deeper in your faith by stepping into serving, do it. If God is calling you to end a friendship because it's toxic and bad for you, do it. If God is calling you to reach out to someone who is struggling and hurting, do it. If God is calling you to open up about something that you're struggling with and something that's really painful in your life, do it. Whatever it is, whatever God is calling you to, take the risk and do it. Get out of your comfort zone.